Hi, welcome back to Rebel Movement Podcast. My name is Billy. My pronouns are they, them, or she, her, and I am glad you're here. Before we get into this week's episode, I want to quickly remind you that on September 20th, 2024, so I don't know, a month from now or so, I'm hosting my very first movement teacher workshop. This workshop accounts for 5 continuing education hours through Yoga Alliance if you're Yoga Alliance certified. It's made for movement teachers, but anyone can join, and it's called Anti-Diet Teaching. In this workshop, I'm going to go over how diet culture affects you and your students, what it is, a bit of a history, um, and essentially help you to teach in a more safer way for people who've been through diet culture or have been through eating disorders, so that your classes can be a little bit more safe feeling, which I think all of our students more than deserve. I don't think you could be in a room without at least half or more of the people in the room having been affected by diet culture in some way. So this workshop is super important, and I'm really excited to be offering it. So again, that's September 20th. There is a payment plan option. There are sliding scale spots available. Just send me a message for those. And the link is in my website, but I'll put it in the show notes as well. If you do have questions or if you want to grab one of the sliding scale spots, send me an email. It's info@movewithbilly.com. And for those of you who are non-movement teachers interested in joining it, just let me know what you do, so I can give some examples that will be more relevant for you for your own work. And then if you're wanting to work with me and you're not a movement teacher, you're not wanting to do the workshop, I have some spaces open for one-on-ones and also in my group movement studio. So my virtual movement studio is called Rebel Movement Club. And if you like the stuff I do here, you'll love the space there. There's online classes every week, yoga, mobility, workouts, um, yoga for anxiety, all sorts of different styles of yoga. There's a queer yoga class, and grabbing the Rebel Movement Club membership gets you access to all that plus a bunch more, including a $300 valued online course about leaving diet culture. So it's kind of like some of the stuff we would do in one-on-one, but you can take it at your own pace. And on demand, you get merch discounts. You can bring a friend once a month. It's pretty sweet. It's only $100 Canadian a month. So you can find all the links for that below. Really recommend it. Honestly, it's so much fun. You get every class except the yoga for anxiety class is a little bit of social time, which I guide you through. And you get a lot of that social, like meeting people part that you might miss from on in-person classes, but you get to do that from your own home, like in your pajamas if you want to, with whatever stuff you have around your house. Plus you get the on-demand, so it's like a yoga membership, a gym membership, and like meditation stuff all in one spot. So make sure you go check out the links in the show notes. We've talked before on this podcast about spiritual bypassing, and I think it's been a bit since we've had a specific episode on it, but it's something that if you've been around for a while, is a big topic. One that is big in itself, and also one that I have a lot of thoughts about and a lot of feelings about. And if you're not sure what spiritual bypassing is, it's essentially using spiritual beliefs to invalidate other people's experiences or feelings. Um, that's not like the dictionary definition, but it's often used to minimize, invalidate, and just sort of, in quotes, prove wrong other people's experiences. It looks a lot like, um, well, some examples you may have heard is like, let it go, or good vibes only, that kind of thing. Um, and I'd really be interested in knowing, like, just like learning about the origins of this. I think I have a suspicion, but today's episode relates to that, and we're going to talk about rage and anger. This is based off of an email I put out back at the end of July, and it's something I've thought about a lot over the years, both as it relates to spiritual bypassing, leaving diet culture, um, processing emotion, like or trauma, and being a rebel movement. Um, so one of the parts of what I consider rebel movement, which is like this podcast, my um club, but also just leaving diet culture in general, I feel like is a rebel movement, or leave it like going against spiritual bypassing. Consider all of those like a rebel movement where you're going against the grain, but you're also standing up for better treatment of maybe yourself, maybe other folks, maybe standing up against oppression, all in my eyes, big rebel movements. And there's one component in all of these that is common, and that's anger. But if you look at spiritual bypassing, it tells us that anger is a destructive emotion and it hurts you more than it hurts them. And I fully disagree. I mean, I think there's a difference between feeling anger and then holding on to it and like setting up a house and living there. Um, Anger is an important emotion and it tells us a great many things, among which is if someone's crossed your boundaries, if you are resentful, if you feel like you deserve better, if you're not, your needs aren't being met, if there's poor treatment somewhere, there's a long list. Those are just a couple of examples. It communicates something to us. And um, I think it's a really important component in healing. So if I want to know how many of you, when I started to talk about anger, got nervous, or if I started to tell you that anger is a valid emotion, or that we're going to talk about rage, how many of you got a little nervous? Honestly, I got a little nervous. I don't know if you could tell in my speaking, but I got a little nervous. Um, did any part of you want to like pause the episode? Thanks for still being here if you haven't, or like distract yourself by doing something else or something. Like how much of you wanted to escape the conversation? I'm not saying this to like call you out or like get you in trouble, but I just think it's we can't talk about rage without also validating or just sort of naming that rage is scary. It's something we've been told is inappropriate, unproductive, like I said, with spiritual bypassing. We've been told it's unladylike, which is disgusting. I hate that term so much. I hate it. That's a different episode. Um, that's one of the reasons I don't like being called a lady because of so many connotations behind the word lady and ladylike. Um, but especially those of us who were assigned female at birth or who were raised as women, um, angry women are often seen or called emotional or hormonal, and a myriad of other bullshit statements and judgments. But those who were raised men were often made to feel like rage was the only appropriate emotion to have. This is not a all like one size fits all thing. It's not the case for every single family. It is also in this case it's gendered because it is, I mean, like I just explained, it's often seen as a gendered thing, which is frankly silly because emotions don't have a gender, and also gender is a construct. Um, it's just there's so many ways this is messed up. And the topic is not necessarily among other emotions are valid, but I do want to say that and pause on that. All emotions are valid. It's okay for anyone, whatever their gender identity is, to feel all the feelings. Anyone, any gender identity can feel angry, can feel sad or devastated or be sensitive or be furious and be taken seriously. That's one of the components that I think is really important to mention is that folks who are seen as or who are raised as women being angry are often not taken seriously. That we're called emotional or sensitive or whatever, or hormonal, as a way to not take our anger seriously. Um, Rage is something that I have been practicing with a therapist, and it does not come to me naturally. I feel like rage, anger, that whole what do you call it, a spectrum is not it's not something that came to me naturally. Like I said, I felt really uncomfortable being angry. I felt pretty unsafe. It was pretty unsafe for me to be angry when I was younger. That doesn't mean I wasn't or didn't portray it sometimes. If you push anyone too far, they'll get angry, but it's emotion that I have a hard time portraying, particularly if it relates to somebody else. I feel like any of my people pleaser friends like myself kind of might get this too, of like, if someone say does something that annoys you, even if it's like, you get slightly frustrated about it, even that sometimes is hard to talk about and you might hold that back. If someone like, I don't know, comes over, I'm just going to give a real example. Um, Sometimes it bugs me if someone will like use a towel and then just leave it as like a clump somewhere, whether it's like messily put back up on the hanger thingy or it's just like in a clump somewhere else. Um, and it's really, if I look at that situation, the seriousness of the situation is not like 10 out of 10. It's like maybe a 1 or a 2, maybe a 3 if it's like the towels are going moldy, but they're not really. It's just my own personal upbringing and like my mother's voice yelling at me that the towel will still be wet, like clearly something I used to do and I got in trouble for. But the problem comes in where if I'm feeling that frustration, but I didn't talk about it, I didn't say, hey, it bugs me when this happens, um, because I was worried about them being mad at me or me being in trouble, or it just was never safe for me. So then maybe my frustration gets even more elevated because I haven't talked about it and they don't know, and then it's happening again. And although this may be small, this is the kind of stuff I started with. Being like, okay, first of all, I have to acknowledge that I feel angry, right? That's a big deal. That felt scary. Like, oh, this makes me frustrated. And like then feeling that frustration, oh my gosh, that's so uncomfortable. Even talking about feeling frustration is uncomfortable, but it is important. And then comes the step of talk, like then actually no, before talking about it. So you feel your feeling, you notice it's there, feel it, and then when you calm down, um, you might look at it and be like, okay, what is this seriousness of this situation? How do I approach this conversation if it has to happen? Um, and that's going to change based on what the situation is. So in this case, it's like a 1 out of 10. So it might be like, hey, um, do you mind just straightening out that towel so it can dry? Cool, awesome. That could be it. Or maybe it's like, hey, um, say if you like flew off the handle about it at one point or whatever, I can't think of, like, you got really frustrated about it. You might be like, hey, I'm sorry that I was rude earlier. When I was a kid, I got in trouble for leaving my towel like that, and I've noticed that it's a really big trigger for me, and I get quite frustrated. But that's on me and not on you. But maybe if we could work together to like try to remember to put the towel out straight or something. You know what I mean? Like just approach the situation how you would. But I just when we're talking about anger and rage, you don't have to start at some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. You can start with like the thing that kind of annoys you around the house that you haven't talked about. You know what I mean? Like if your partner just like, I don't know, never cleans the bathroom for some reason. And maybe there's like a sense of unspoken agreement, but you're kind of getting annoyed with cleaning the bathroom. Feel the feelings with that. How serious is it? How do you approach the conversation? Do your best to say, like, hey, I know there was like an unspoken maybe agreement that I clean the bathroom and you do the dishes, but I'm getting really tired of doing it. Do you think maybe this week we could switch? You know what I mean? Like I feel like those things we might write off as just a small thing, but they actually are, in my eyes, like teeny tiny moments of rebellion, if especially if you are someone who's been told that your anger is not important. or that your voice is not important, or your feelings are invalid, or you have been raised to say that, anger is not valid. And you can do the same thing on the flip side. If you're someone who was told or made to feel like you can never feel sad, I mean, it's going to look a little bit different, but maybe you feel sad when like your friend cancels plans on you. And then maybe your act of rebellion is for, I mean, same steps, noticing that you feel it, feeling the feelings. And when you've calmed down and you're a little bit more grounded, having the conversation with them, being like, hey, totally understand you had some, whatever, you weren't feeling well. I just want to have a conversation because I felt sad because I miss you and I feel like we haven't hung out in ages and I felt like blown off because it was, I don't know. I can't because it was like so last minute. You know what I mean? Where you can hold space for your feelings and validate them and then talk about them, but also hold space for whatever the other person might be saying. And hopefully I mean, if they care about you, they will listen to your feelings and validate them. And then um, you're just both practicing having difficult conversations. So I have been practicing this, and my practice has looked a lot like what I've just talked about, but it also, some of my anger is towards people or like people, we'll start with that, people who I am not in contact with and do not want to have a conversation with, and things which obviously you can't have a conversation with. So sometimes I feel really stuck and I don't know how to express anger. And this happened when I wrote this email. This is what inspired it. I felt really stuck and had no idea how to talk about my anger because it felt like no combination of words could express how angry I was feeling. Like betrayal, anger, rage, none of those felt like in big enough words, and none of the words I could find were valid. And he told me sometimes rage is communication that some needs aren't being met, whether we are needing safety, protection, validation, or being seen. So, like I brought up at the beginning, rage is a communication of a boundary being crossed or something else. You don't feel that rage for nothing. You might feel rage, say, for about the towel, but say the amount of rage you feel is not an appropriate amount for this towel being left on the floor. Towels left on the floor and you're like 10 out of 10 angry. And when you feel your feelings and you reflect and you're grounded, you might notice, oh, hey, this is more than, like, this isn't just about the towel. This is a big amount of anger for a towel. And in that situation, maybe it's safe for you to reflect, journal, or talk to your therapist and say, like, and then maybe you find out that, like me, underneath that, you know, seemingly small situation was a pretty big history of me being yelled at or getting in trouble for doing that, like for leaving my towel on the floor. And then so maybe it's a question of safety or protection that I didn't get. This is not something you're necessarily going to do all at once. You know what I mean? Um, but I really want to pause on that and just say one more time, rage is not for nothing. It's not, it's not nothing. You don't get, you don't feel angry at nothing most of the time. Most of the time. It might be that you're like haven't slept in a couple of days, so there might not necessarily be one situation that's at the core of it, but there's still a need not being met. You know what I mean? Um, and sometimes you might not understand in the moment what the rage is about, and that's okay too. You don't have to figure it out right now. What you might do is just feel your feelings, which I know is just like it's hard. Um, but it is important. So this foundation I've been laying of rage being a communication of a need or like how it might look or how we might process it, I'm setting up for a reason because I want to talk about rage and diet culture. And that's a big topic. And if this is feeling like a big topic, if you need a second, like pause whenever you need to, rewind, or just pause it and come back because some cases this might bring up stuff. So I want to zero in on rage in our bodies. And I don't just mean like what I'm meaning in this case is rage towards our bodies, but I will also have a little aside to say that often rages in our bodies. Like we feel it in our bodies. Like maybe you feel like your heart's racing. Maybe your jaw is like I was like crunching. That's gross. Tensed. Maybe your shoulders are tense. Maybe you are feeling hot, like your face is hot. Um, it will show up in your body, but I want to talk about rage towards your body. When I was in the worst of my eating disorder, I felt so much rage at my body, toward my body. I felt like my body was the problem. I felt like it betrayed me. I loathed it. Like there's not enough meaning behind those words to portray the depth of hatred I felt towards my body. I thought about it all the time. I thought, oh, I'm doing all these things. I'm not eating. I'm moving my body way too much. Why are you not working? Like, what is wrong with you? I won't go too deep into that because that part I know can be really tricky. But there was this constant hatred that fueled every single fucking choice I made relating to food, relating to clothes, relating to movement, interacting with others. I never went swimming because I didn't want to be seen in a swimsuit. I love swimming. I didn't try out for anything that might seem fun because I didn't want to be seen. I thought, well, I can't do this until my body's smaller. I didn't play shows when I wanted to play shows because of my body. I didn't ask someone out or like put myself out there to be dating because of my body. I didn't want to go to hang out with friends sometimes because of my body. Um, I missed out on so much joy because of the hatred towards my body. And I want to pause there for a second. Let's just take a breath together. Okay. You grounded? I know that a lot of you relate to what I just talked about. And I know that it is so easy to go towards the road of blaming ourselves. Like, oh, I did all these things. I I ruined my own life. I was the reason I couldn't have joy. It's all towards ourself again. I see you. I have been there. But I'm going to ask you to pause and take a second because when I look back now, I can see it way more compassionately and can recognize that my body was never the problem. I'm going to say that again. And I really hope that you can like sink into understanding. It sounds really weird, but your body was never the problem. Your body has never been the problem. The problem was diet culture. The problem is the system that we grew up in. The problem was diet culture. So the problem is that sometime in the 18th century, fatness started being equated with blackness, and thinness started being equated with godliness. So if you're a thin body, you are more likely to be like go to heaven and whatever. Um, the problem is that since then, the healthcare system has been at its core biased based on false biased data that has been disproven like more than one time. The problem is that the diet industry is several $100 billion all being spent to make you feel bad about your body so that you'll pay to have it fixed. Several $1 billion industry that makes its money off of making you feel not good enough. Several $1 billion industry that makes its money making you feel like your body is the problem. Let that sink in for a sec, because that's messed up. Your rage that you're feeling is justified. It's just pointed in the wrong direction. It's never been about your body. You were made to feel bad so that this industry could make money. This industry that is based off of racist, patriarchal bullshit data. Your rage is a signal of injustice. It's a signal that those hundreds of billions of dollar ads worked. Rage is a part of healing, and it's what we have to do to take big, scary steps to redirect the rage. Sorry, what we have to do. So I'm not saying it like it's a small thing. I get that it's difficult, is to take, even if it's a teeny shift, to move that rage away from your body and towards the system. Does that make sense? We're moving the arrow away from our bodies and towards what caused this. And I know that you're like, how the fuck do I do that? Yeah, right. Right? How the fuck do I do that? Um, Start small. I will say we could do this together in one-on-ones. If you sign up to work with me, link in the bio. I do one-on-ones. This is stuff I do with my clients all the time. But aside from paying to work with me, here's a couple of things you might do. First is start to connect to your body again. That might look like putting a hand anywhere on your body, where it's your knee, your hand, your finger, whatever, your belly, and just say hi. You don't have to say it out loud. You can say it in your head, whatever. And then ask your body how it's feeling. What does it need? Are there any messages that you've missed out on? That might be like, hey, I'm hungry. Okay, cool. Or maybe it's like, oh, I'm like tired. Or you do that and you say you're sitting at your desk and you're like, oh, I'm like hunching over and my back is starting to hurt. So I'm gonna shift positions or stand up for a sec, right? Doesn't have to be anything very big. Start that connection with your body compassionately or neutrally. It doesn't have to be like, I think one of the things we think that has to happen in this work is that you go from hating your body to loving it overnight. That's not how it works. You might loathe it and then you hate it and then you like strongly dislike it. You go down that like scale and then you're like okay with it. And then you're like, I don't know. And then you're like, I like it sometimes. And then maybe one day you love it, but then maybe you also go back and forth between that scale all the time, and that's all still valid. Doesn't have to look like anything, but what we're not going to do is treat our body like it's the problem anymore, because we know that it's not. We know that regardless of how we feel about our bodies, they still deserve to exist, right? I'm going to say that. I'm going to pause on that again too. Your body deserves to exist. You deserve to exist. I know that's hard to hear. I didn't feel like I deserved to exist for most of my life. And I know that I would tear up just hearing that. But I believe it so deeply in my body now, but I didn't always. I One of the things that helped me to get here though was feeling the rage towards the system that deserved the rage. Feeling the rage towards diet culture and being like, this is messed up. Because it takes a lot of that emotion away. Because, like I said at the beginning, I wasn't a person that felt like I could feel my anger. So I often felt it towards myself. I directed that anger inwards when it did never deserve to be inwards. It wasn't me. It wasn't my body's fault. Redirect it outwards. And I will just give a little, I don't know if warning is a strong word, but sometimes this might be connected to other parts of your healing, other parts of your trauma, if you have trauma. Um, and for me, it wasn't just redirecting rage about diet culture. It also related to like the person who made comments about my weight when I was a kid. And then, I had to redirect that anger towards them, which is not, I did in therapy and in journaling and whatever, in constructive, positive, not positive feeling, but in therapeutic ways. um, and then I also felt the rage of never having being able to use my voice or ask for help, or the rage against my abusers. And those are all separate and difficult and horrible and fucking awful, because you should never have been in situations that you were in. And it can bring up a lot, but you don't have to go all there all at once, you know? That brings me to my second point. Invite 2% of the rage to exist in your body. I don't mean towards it. I mean, you know how I talked about how some emotions will like show up in your body in terms of how you experience the feeling. Invite 2%. This is straight from my therapist. 1 or 2% of the emotion to just exist in your body. What would be supportive of it? Like what would feel supportive? Maybe that's like writing an angry song about it, or like writing an angry poem or an angry letter towards like diet culture. You can even make up like a fake CEO of diet culture and like write it to that person. I don't know. Maybe that's helpful for you. Maybe it's like I honestly lifting weights and cardio are really helpful for me. Maybe it's something else. Currently have an angry playlist that I'm using. I think it's called Raise Your Damn Voice. It's on Spotify. I can always send it to you if you want. I'm not saying it is the perfect whatever. It just helps me in my feeling angry. Some people like to creative write or, do any kind of artwork stuff. I would just say like be safe and keep checking in with how you're feeling, how it feels in your body, and try to keep to a small percentage. Especially if you're a person who it maybe you relate to my experience of like not really feeling safe or being comfortable feeling it. A little tiny bit at a time is a lot easier. And maybe like we said at the beginning, maybe you don't start with feeling about anger about diet culture. Maybe you start with the like towel left on the floor. And then what I will say can be helpful is when you have one of those moments where you slide back to, say, hatred on that scale, maybe you slide back to hatred because you maybe you tried on your bathing suit and it didn't quite fit and it all came back like none of your healing happened. Um, in those moments, it can be helpful to ask what, or how do I say this? It can be helpful to remind yourself that your body is not the problem. I know that's really hard. So what I tried to do is remind myself, oh no, this is what I tried to do. Sorry, it's been a little bit since I've had to do this. Okay, if this example of like trying on a bathing suit was working and I was like, oh, or it was what was happening, and I was feeling like insecure about my belly showing, which is like an actual example of what's happened with me previously. Um, like, oh, I can't wear this because I can't show my belly. But like, who says? And then that prompts me to be like, oh, this isn't my rule. This is from diet culture. This is, all those stupid magazines that tell me that this person from the 90s was in quotes fat when like using fat is a bad word, which it's not. But this is a product of the bullshit that I was raised with, not me. I can exist in my body. I find that's not like the only way to approach those situations. And you can check back the episode of Piper. I don't remember how many episodes it was. We go through some very real example, like very helpful things for your nervous system in those moments. One of the things that helps me is that reframing or just reminding myself that the rage isn't my body's fault. Because if that was my, I don't know, if go-to or my habitual reaction for most of my life was anger at my body, and then it would spiral. Um, and that for me is like a big, huge stop sign. That's like, wait, it's not your body's fault. What I would love is if you would send me a message, Instagram, email, whatever. Let me know how this felt for you, how talking about this felt. And I'm just going to say, sometimes the first step in you healing your relationship with your body or in allowing yourself to feel your anger is to just listen to this episode or like talk about it or Like, especially if you're a person who is into social justice work, I feel like, I mean, this is not necessarily universal, but I feel like one of the main parts of social justice work is that recognition of the injustice. And feeling our anger is what fuels us to ask or demand better. We feel rage and hopelessness and betrayal and all sorts of feelings about the genocide in Palestine. And maybe that fuels us to talk about it and sign petitions and go to rallies or call our representatives or maybe make donations to Palestinian families, right? It's not going to necessarily be the same action steps for everybody, but what is behind that is the rage of the injustice. And that's an integral part of it is the rage and the recognition that something's fucked up, that it's not right, that they're whoever the party is deserves better, that this maybe the system in itself is fucked up or whatever. That's what fuels change. And I think that it can be really helpful to think of this as within ourselves as well. Often, like I definitely was I was into social justice when I was younger, and I could sort of do that with things happening in the world, say like climate crisis or whatever. But I couldn't have the same compassion in my response to myself. You know what I mean? So let me know how this felt. Let me know what you like to do to help with this. Help feeling anger, help with your help you tell diet culture to fuck off. um, what you do in those situations where maybe everything kind of comes flooding back and you're like, what was the point of all this work? Which I'll just say, I know that in those moments it feels like you're back to square one, but you're not. I tried to make this episode a little bit more linear, make a little bit more sense. I tried to build a structure for you, set down the base of what anger and rage might um, feel like in some smaller moments and how you might work with it and then move into the diet culture and then bring it all back at the beginning. And I feel like I did okay. Um, but I am still a neurodivergent person who um, I'll just say has lots and lots of traits of ADHD. So you get what you get, but I did my very best. Hopefully it translated. I'm really excited to hear how you like this episode. I'm excited to work with you. I love working with people one-on-one because well, I just love it in general, but it is very empowering to even witness other folks start to claim their rage and start to claim their body back and feel empowered. Um, One of the coolest fucking things I've seen. If you have a second, rate, review, subscribe, send this episode to someone who you think might need it. Tag me on social media if you listened. And I hope you have a fantastic week. Bye.